Captain may not have been on the bridge in South Korean ferry disaster. Skepticism over deal to ease tensions in Ukraine. And 4 members of New Citizens Movement jailed on the mainland.
Good evening. Prosecutors in South Korea say they've asked a court to issue arrest warrants for the captain and 2 crew members of the ferry that sank on Wednesday. The number of dead in the tragedy has risen to at least 28. 268 of the 475 passengers and crew aboard are still missing. And as Alan Buckner reports, there are now fresh questions as to whether quicker action by the captain could have saved lives.
Just a small portion of the sunken ferry remains visible above the surface of the water. Although the weather improved somewhat today, strong tides and murky water continue to hamper rescue efforts. Air has been pumped into the vessel, but divers have had trouble entering it. 2 divers did manage to open a cargo compartment, but they couldn't get any further because of obstacles in their way. Cranes that will be used to try to salvage the ship arrived at the scene today, but the South Korean Coast Guard is reviewing its options carefully because they don't want to hurt any survivors who may be trapped inside. The chief investigator of the accident said today the captain of the ferry may not have been on the bridge at the time of the accident, with the 3rd mate at the helm. Park Jae-eok said the investigation is focused on possible crew negligence, problems with cargo stowage, and structural defects of the ship. But the vessel appears to have passed all safety checks. They're looking into why it took almost a half hour to begin the evacuation of the ferry. The captain, 69-year-old Lee Jun-seok, is facing a criminal investigation, which is standard under South Korean law. Last night, investigators searched the headquarters of Cheonghae-jin Marine, the owner of the vessel, and seized a number of documents. Meanwhile, family members of the missing passengers, many of them high school children who were on an outing, prayed for the return of their loved ones. There was also anger over the news of the delayed evacuation. Experts say it is now unlikely any of the missing will be found alive. Alan Buckner, TVB News.
At least 12 people have been killed in a massive avalanche on the slopes of Mount Everest, the world's highest mountain. 3 others are missing. The avalanche struck just above the Everest base camp in an area known to climbers as Popcorn Field. Sherpa guides had climbed the slope early in the morning to fix ropes and prepare the route for mountaineers when tragedy struck. Nepal authorities say some were rescued and pledged to continue the search and rescue operation in the hope of finding more survivors. Well, a day after crisis talks in Geneva ended with a call for an immediate end to the violence in Ukraine, both sides in the conflict are waiting to see what happens next. As James Aiken reports, there is plenty of skepticism about how or if the agreement among Ukraine, Russia and the United States and the European Union will be implemented.
The meeting was intense and long. 6 hours after it began, diplomats emerged with a joint statement and apparent signs of progress.
We agreed today that all illegal armed groups must be disarmed, that all illegally seized buildings must be returned to their legitimate owners, and all illegally occupied streets, squares, and other public places in Ukrainian cities and towns must be vacated.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov called the agreement initial concrete steps that will de-escalate tensions and restore security in Ukraine. The White House called the meeting promising, but there was also skepticism.
My hope is that we actually do see follow-through over the next several days, but I don't think, given past performance, that we can count on that, and we have to be prepared to potentially respond to what continue to be efforts of interference by the Russians.
With questions lingering over the Kremlin's willingness to meet Western demands, Russian President Vladimir Putin has accused the new Ukrainian leadership of committing a grave crime. by using the army to push back pro-Russian protesters in eastern regions. And he has not ruled out sending troops to the region. In the southern city of Mariupol, tensions remain high after 3 pro-Russian militants died when Ukrainian troops repelled an attack on a National Guard base. And while tensions have eased in the eastern Ukrainian city of Slavyansk, pro-Russian activists remain in control of key government buildings 5 days after they seized them. Meanwhile, Ukraine's leaders say implementing the Geneva Agreement will be a test of Russia's intent on de-escalating the crisis in Ukraine.
The next couple of days will be crucial.
James Aiken, TVB News.
In Beijing, 4 human rights activists were sentenced to jail today for disrupting public order. The sentencing has drawn international criticism as lawyers for the activists insist they're being persecuted for pushing government officials to disclose their assets. Security was tight outside the Haidian District People's Court today. Pedestrian walkways were cordoned off with plenty of police officers standing guard. The court criticised human rights lawyer Ding Jiaxi and his fellow defendants for disturbing public order and disregarding the country's laws. In the verdict, it said everyone has the right to express their views, but this must be done according to the law. It said it was against regulations for them to hand out leaflets and display large banners in busy public spaces and not to cooperate with law enforcement. Ding was handed 3.5 years in jail. Zhao Changqing, who had already been jailed 3 times in the past for pro-democracy activities, got 2.5 years. Li Wei and Zhang Baocheng were given 2 years each. All 4 are members of the anti-corruption New Citizens Movement. Just last week, the movement's leader, lawyer Xu Jiyong, lost an appeal against his 4-year jail sentence. All that has raised concerns in the international community.
The EU expressed its deep concern about the confirmation of the sentence of Xu Jiyong last week, and also its deep concern about the prosecution, the ongoing prosecution of other people advocating the rule of law, transparency, and promoting the fight against corruption.
Ding's lawyer said he will appeal. Zhang Keke was adamant the actions of the 4 didn't constitute disturbing public order, saying they didn't harm anyone or disrupt traffic. He insisted it's a political move by the authorities because the activists have been pushing for officials to disclose their assets as part of their campaign against corruption. The 4 men have 10 days to file an appeal. And back locally, a statue of the goddess of democracy has been installed in a museum in 18Apr2014 in memory of the June 4th Tiananmen Square crackdown. Rachel Leung reports.
Preparations for the Memorial Museum are in high gear ahead of its opening. Today, organizers set up a statue of the goddess of democracy there. The 6.4-foot structure in memory of June 4th was brought to the museum on the 5th floor of a commercial building in 18Apr2014 just before noon. It's made entirely out of plaster. It took a group of art graduates from 6 different universities and tertiary institutions 14 days to complete the statue. The Hong Kong Alliance in Support of Patriotic Democratic Movements of China had placed it near the entrance of the exhibition hall.
When you look at the whole museum, there will be a lot of, very heavy experience emotionally. When they come out, we hope that they would not be saddened by the incident, but to raise the hope for democracy through this democracy, the goddess for democracy. So we want the people to have the feel of the whole June 4th.
More than a month ago, the owners' corporation of the building issued a letter to the Alliance stating the unit cannot be used as an exhibition hall. 2 owners have decided to take the issue to court. Lee says the Alliance has not yet received any related correspondence from the owners.
We are more than ready to face the legal challenge through our lawyer teams, and we have confidence in that. But we are really very disturbed by the fact that we are being challenged legally. We believe it's a political motivated legal challenge because there's only 2 owners out of the 17 who are saying that they will foot the bill, which is very, very unusual.
The museum was originally set to open this Sunday, but now the opening date has been pushed back to April 26 because of a delay in construction. Rachel Ling, TVB News.
The government appears to be scaling down a plan to build 17,000 public housing units in the Wangchao area in Yulong. As Joanna Silva reports, rural leaders blame it partly on the low compensation that the government is offering landowners.
Yesterday's farmland, today's brownfield site. The government was looking into developing public housing on some 34 hectares of brownfields currently used as open-air storage space for the logistics industry. The plan would see the construction of some 17,000 units that would be home to 52,000 people. But now it looks as though the government is backtracking. The Yulong District Council says it's been informed that for now the plan is to push through with just 4,000 units, or just a quarter of what was originally intended, due to difficulties in securing the land for development. The chairman of the Yulong District Council, Leung Zhejiang, explains that the government has been offering a maximum compensation of about $800 per square foot to landowners. That's below the market price of more than $1,000. Rural leader Leung Fok-yoon, who also represents a logistics industry association in the new territories, explains that some of that land will still need to be used as storage space. He says it's hard to find storage space in the urban area. He also says the compensation offered by the government is inadequate. And Professor Edward Yu, an expert in housing and urban planning at Chinese University, points out that the government has yet to devise policies targeting brownfield sites. Joanna Silva, TVB News.
And still ahead in the news tonight. Remembering Gabriel Garcia Marquez and his magical realism. Locally, health authorities monitoring new MERS cases overseas, and the cross fever grips Hong Kong.
From director Steven Spielberg, based on the French comics by Hergé.
Everybody knows him, that's Tintin.
Comes an adventure of mystery.
What secrets do you hold?
And a whole lot of danger.
What kind of danger?
Saturday, The Adventures of Tintin on Pearl's weekend blockbuster.
I have an 11-year-old son.
Why don't we just assume that you're not the dad?
My son wants to meet me, and I want to meet him.
I moved into Chase's apartment. We're not having sex with each other.
Monday, House at 10:40 on Pearl.
And welcome back to TVB News. Tributes have been pouring in from around the world for Colombian writer Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who died overnight in Mexico. The writer, whose beguiling stories of life and love put magical realism on the literary map, was the author of several classics and a Nobel Prize winner. He was considered one of the greatest Spanish-language writers of the 20th century, the author of classics like 100 Years of Solitude and Love in the Time of Cholera. Now the world is mourning the loss of Nobel laureate Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who died in Mexico City aged 87. His loss will not only be felt in his native Colombia, but also in Mexico, which had been his home for more than 30 years. The cause of his death was not immediately disclosed, but he had been in hospital for a lung and urinary tract infection. Tributes poured in from all over, with the leaders of Colombia and Mexico praising his massive contribution to